Welcome to Coaching While Black, a CHJS podcast. My name is Chris Reed. I'm your host. I'm joined by
Anthony Andino,
Armond Richards.
And this episode, we're going to be chatting about sports specialization and how it impacts youth athletes. So to start out, gentlemen, talk to me about sports specialization and what that means to you as coaches and to you as a parent of a potential athlete.
We speak about this all the time. You take the joy out of it when you try to force a kid to just put themselves in one's box. And you also kind of take away their ability to be imaginative and explorative when you make them do just one thing instead of allowing them to try multiple things to see where they fit in.
Yeah, and like from a parent's perspective, it's easy to see the dollar signs or the fame or what sports can be for the successful athlete. And so, like, that's the pathway you hopefully set your kid on. I feel like a lot of times it's hard to even know you're being a sports specialist.
I mean, at the same time, though, like, when you say dollar signs, like, for some parents, like, hey, you got to pick one because I can't afford for you to do basketball and soccer and football and swimming. And that plays into it, too. But as much opportunity as you can provide for young people to do more, and again, I know cost is a thing, I think it's a good idea.
I think also it's a couple other factors too. As a parent, what do you know? Like, what did you grow up playing? What are you comfortable helping your kid learn? And also, like, what's offered? You know, not every space has every sport. 100%. Not every city has a youth sports program that is for baseball, is for fencing, is for archery, is for soccer, is for swimming. Some cities, literally, all they have is what they have at their disposal. So it may be a space where it's only basketball or it's only football, it's only baseball. So I think that factors into it. But I think what I really want to get into is those young people who are told you're going to play basketball and that's it, or you're going to play soccer and that's it. Why is that harmful, or how could that be harmful to a young person's development?
Yeah, from a personal standpoint, I was a soccer player. I played from a very young age, 6, and then when I got to sophomore year in high school, like, something happened. And I was just, after playing school soccer and club soccer, which is a year-round monster that I'm sure many parents understand, I was done with the sport. And I think burnout is probably one of the number one problems you get with sports specialization is the sheer numbers of hours that you spend having to put your energy into this thing that you may not even really want, or you want other things just as much. And so that can definitely lead to you abandoning this thing that...
I mean, yeah, and, you know, having lived in that space, too, to be successful in one sport and, like, you specialize in that thing, you sacrifice a lot. Right, like when you're young and you got friends going to the beach, now you in camp. You got to go to the court. You got to work on your game. You got 6 games a day. I know that's an exaggeration, but like I remember being in New York. I had a game in West 4th, and then there's another game in Brooklyn. Then you got to go the next day to Pelham Bay Park, hoops in the sun, right? And these things are nowhere near each other.
Yeah.
Right. So how much time you dedicate to that means you can't be outside with your friends. You can't play video games. You can't do all the other things that young kids are doing with you. I mean, they're doing around you. And that kind of sucks. And you want to be a part of those things. But at the same time, you got other people telling you to feed into this machine. And you're doing just this one thing because they talk about all the benefits or where you can go or what doors it can open up for you. But they don't understand how many milestones you're missing and how much you just want to be a kid at sometimes.
Yeah, and I think technology also plays a role in that. To both of your points, you know, if I'm a kid that I'm playing sports and doing all this, but all my neighborhood friends are out having fun, they're doing this, they're doing that, I'm going to see that on social media, right? Like, I'm going to miss that moment. Like, I'm going to see that they're having an amazing time and be feeling left out, or I didn't have that opportunity. The other part of technology, too, and to speak about burnout, is that you have kids who like sports. Some kids love sports enough to play, but then you have some kids that like sports enough to just be interested. And so I don't need to play. I can go play video games.
Right.
Like, instead of playing basketball and having this coach make me run and yell at me and fuss at me, I just go do numbers on my player, right? And have a sense of community and fun, but also have some flexibility and control over my time. And so for me, I think when people talk about sports specialization and having your kid play one sport, you are cutting off so many possibilities. So when I was coming to the workforce, one of the things I kept hearing is transferable skills, right? Like, you should have transferable management skills from whatever job you work. So if you worked at Target, that can apply to the boardroom here. That can apply to this place here. And I think it's the same when you talk about certain sports. Like, soccer players are actually set up to be great shooters in basketball. right? Because they have to score from a perimeter. They're set up to be great scorers.
Whole body worth of touch.
Right?
The footwork.
Yeah, and so I think that parents may not be educated enough to understand that. And I know we talked about this prior to this conversation about like outliers, right? Like Steph Curry, his dad was an NBA player, his brother's an NBA player, he's an NBA player. They probably really never dabbled in other sports, right? And people will use that as the pedestal of like, well, look at Steph Curry, he only played this and this is what he is. Or, you know, look at certain other athletes. But if you look at, like I'm a football nerd. If you look at the transformation of the quarterback position in the NFL, it's a lot of black quarterbacks now. But a lot of those guys play baseball, right? Patrick Mahomes, his father's an MLB player. He played baseball growing up. His throwing range is different. His ability to move is different. His range of motion when he's actually throwing the ball is different. Same with Kyler Murray, Jameis Winston. These guys they could have played professional baseball. So I think that having an opportunity to give a kid a chance to learn something new, stave off burnout a little bit, but also now you're doubling up on missing out on the social stuff, right?
Yeah, 100%. And we want to make sure that when we have young people who want to do those things, instead of telling them, okay, you know, if you want to play basketball, you can't do anything else. If you want to support them in the right way, you're trying to find skills that are transferable to the other thing, right? Like me, I love basketball, but I had fun playing football too. So instead of people saying, hey, don't do that, be a quarterback, right? Because that outlet pass will be something that the time that it takes for you to be a good quarterback and how you have to read angles to be able to make those passes and make them accurate will do wonders for you as a basketball player. That outlet will get us so many points of transition. And when you think about it that way, instead of trying to box someone in, think about what islands of competency transfer from one sport into the next. I think that allows our young people to be the best version of themselves. And it will kind of, if you force them to think about it that way, or kind of get them to think about it that way, you get what you want as a coach, right? At least in my opinion. My coach was like, hey, go do what you want to do because I can't stop you from doing that anyway. But this part of that sport makes this part of it easier for us here.
Is the sports IQ for whatever sports you choose to focus on, is that worth the specialization above like some kid who's doing this sport part-time?
I think it matters more. Like I remember
Good question.
That is a great question. Like I think it matters if they work together, if they blend, like, hey, you're gonna run track in the spring because you play football in the fall and winter, right? Like things like that. I think the IQ thing is more so just your development, right? Like the more sports you play, the more you consume, the smarter you're gonna be about movements, who needs to be where, what needs to be where, but also it's a brain overload. You know, and sometimes things can kind of meld together. I think that even if you're gonna have a child that plays multiple sports, it needs to be done in moderation, and it needs to be like carefully done the older they get. But also the shift in tone and physicality in the sports also matter, right? If I'm playing tennis in the spring and I'm a tennis champion, but then they're like, hey, you should play football to gain some weight and bulk up, you may actually do a detriment to your tennis career, right? So I think that's a part of it too, is making sure that they do blend, making sure that they do work well together, but also you don't want to stymie a person too. If they're interested in something, I think to an extent they should be allowed to explore. My question to you, Anthony, like you play college ball, so as you're in high school, you know, like you have offers on the table, you have an opportunity to go and play college ball somewhere, but then it's like your junior year, the football coach says, hey, why don't you come out and try out and I can help you put some weight on, or I can help you do this, I can help you do that, that might actually endanger your scholarship. How would you talk a coach and a parent through something like that?
Well, in college, not high school, but in college, one of the coaches was like, hey, you're pretty quick, you're pretty athletic. Do you want to play rugby? Right? Barbaric.
Yeah,
sport,
savage
right?
sport.
But
Fun.
he was like, you won't get hit as much because we'll put you on the end, we'll put you on the wing, right? So that way you'll just be the guy who scores a lot, because that's what happens when you get the ball on the outside. You run, nobody catch you, you're fine. My mom was like, I don't know about that. Like, and I remember we spoke about her a lot. She's very, very, very encouraging, but she was like, not this one, right? But I did it anyway. I got hit once, and I was like,
And that's it. That was it.
But at the same time, right? those workouts, the stamina that I got from running with those guys and doing all those workouts made me a better basketball player, right? So yes, you can tell your young people, hey, there's these risks, but if you also understand and have them weigh the benefits to it too, but again, not in a way that is punitive, you're educating them. If you see it as the point of, hey, you can acquire these skills and not so much you saying, hey, this takes away from what I need you to do, I think you're more likely, again, to have the young person make more informed decisions. And it may not be what you want them to do, but as long as they're making informed decisions for what's best for them, I think it's okay.
So this past couple months over the winter, I coached basketball at a middle school, sport that I am only familiar with superficially. I played a little bit as a kid, but soccer was my expertise. And the coach asked me to coach because a good coach is a good coach, and I was available. So I was like, yeah, I'll coach, man. And as soon as I stepped on the court, I realized I didn't know anything about basketball. Oh, crap, I can call timeouts? I can do that anytime I want? And the kids were like, yeah. I was like, okay, I learned something. Thanks, kids. Like, I'm learning this sport as we go. But, like, I realized that the kids that I can actually depend on to adapt are the ones that were taking skills from other sports because I couldn't teach them basketball skills. So if you were on my soccer team, then we had a better way to communicate and you knew sort of what I was asking for to translate over to basketball. If you played lacrosse, you understood what I asked for when I was like, I need you to get a little more aggressive. Okay. If you're just coming to basketball for the first time, you don't really know what that means. It's not really that physical a sport. And if it is, you get a lot of fouls called. You know, basketball is a very start and stop sport. Lacrosse, soccer, physicality is a part and parcel of the sport. So like it happens and the game keeps going, and I was able to use that aspect of that sport to get my kids off of referees, to get them running a different way. So like, from a coach perspective, sports specialization helps you in other sports to like take what you know about football, baseball, and like those skill sets, they are transferable. If you can find the space to like, yeah, man, we launch the balls down the court sometimes. This is how you do a proper throw. Any of those things work, for sure.
I find it interesting that youth sports is this multi-million-dollar industry. Like, you see that in headlines, you see that in magazines, you see that even on ESPN. And to me, when it comes to sports specialization, what that means is that people are starting businesses now where they're giving kids one sport from age 3 on. And I remember growing up, I was a rec baby, DC Parks and Rec. We were introduced to sports every year by age. So, like, if you were 5 and 6, you played soccer and tennis, right? And I loved basketball even at that age. I had to wait till I was 9 before we actually had a league for our age group, right? And so we were introduced to so many other things early on that we grew a love for sports and not a love for a sport. And I think now the inverse is happening because people only want to do this, or this one coach is doing really great at this one thing. That kid only plays that one thing for so long, they didn't even get the opportunity to expand upon sports as a whole, and it's more like, I'm just gonna do this one thing.
And let's remind everybody that we are very brain-centric in our perspective. So when we say sports specialization, we mean like you are training your kid's brain to only function really successfully in this one situation. And I can't think of many super successful athletes who have that sort of rigid thinking when it comes to their sport.
I mean, some of the best played multiple sports. Like LeBron James could have been one of the best tight ends to ever play football, right? Allen Iverson was a great
football player
as well. And we think about, you know, the skills that those people were, like Antonio Gates played basketball, right?
Mm-hmm.
Use that skill, use those box out drills.
You go back to like the Bo Jackson, Deion Sanders, double up people.
Deion, right? These dudes were masterful at one thing, but they used the skills that they were great at in one thing to be dominant in other fields too. And it's okay for them, and it was okay for them to do that.
Yeah, I think there's less examples of two sport athletes now.
Definitely.
But even in one sport, like Shohei Ohtani, right? Mm-hmm. This guy's literally one of the best pitchers on the planet, and he's also one of the best hitters on the planet. And that usually doesn't happen.
Right.
Like there's a time in your life where it's like you're either going to be a pitcher
or
you're going to be a
He's
hitter.
the first person I've ever seen get paid 2 salaries at the same time. Think about it.
That's true.
He gets paid $760 million. That's his contract to be a hitter and a pitcher. He set the market because he's done something nobody's ever done.
Yeah.
And you put it in that perspective really made me think about it in that way.
And to your point about like training your child or training an athlete to only think things one way, we're not setting them up for critical moments. We're not setting them up. We're not providing manageable amounts of stress. And sometimes, like, just getting out of a funk of, like, I've been playing this the entire time, and now, like, let's go do something else for fun. Like, how many times has a coach had a team, they're struggling, they're a basketball team, it's not working, we're gonna go out and play mini golf or something like that. We're bowling, like, we're gonna mix it up. We're still gonna have the sport aspect of our time. We're still gonna have that relationship building. We're gonna have all that stuff, but I'm gonna take that pressure off of you to just focus on this one thing. And I think if you have that mindset for young people early enough in their lives, they don't get bogged down. They don't burn out. Young people are burning out of sport at a higher rate right now than they ever have since COVID, because they have choice and control to just not play at all. Right? And so the ones that are playing are being, like, hammered home. You got to do this. You have to do it this way, or you only can play this one thing. And I know, to your point too, sometimes it's a financial thing, right? Like, sometimes you just don't have the money. Like you said,
money or time.
You said recently somebody took up snowboarding.
Yeah.
Right? And it was way more expensive than what you thought it was going to be, right? And that's something a kid could see on TV. Like, when we were growing up, we had the X Games.
Yeah.
I've never been skiing, but I would love to try. But then there's a price barrier. There's a location barrier, right? So there are barriers to sports specialization, but I think there are some benefits to allowing your child to have another experience, or even just experience a different coach.
Yeah, that.
You know? Like, I'm tired of talking to the same person. I'm tired of having the same person talk to me about the same thing over and over again. It becomes dull to your mind. It's not as stimulating anymore. Like you said, we want parents, we want everybody to understand the brain. If you understand how your young people are wired, you also know, like, they need different stimulus. They need something else going on. Your girls are about to explore sports, and you're a soccer coach. Are you default to them playing soccer, or how are you approaching their sports journey?
That is a great question. I have created a very, very strong stance of telling the public and the world that no, I am not forcing them or even encouraging them to play soccer. My wife, however, has signed them up for soccer, and I'm happy for that. And I'm excited to see how they take what they know so far about themselves and sports and all that stuff, which is probably more than I think, but I haven't really been in that space with them so far to see, like, them interact that way. But I'm really excited to see how they take
goes.
to, and what they do find a niche for. So I feel like that's part of the fun of sports specialization is, as a kid, I have found something I'm good at, and it has been recognized and validated, and now the world is saying I can be great.
Yeah.
And how can you, I don't want to be the guy that tells a kid, no, you're probably normal and average, which you probably are, we all are. But, like, this can hurt you too, this dream, this sports specialization. But at the same time, like, yeah, man, dream that dream.
Yeah.
Go for the academy that can, I guess, we mentioned before, like, we were a part of the system. We fed into that thing, and we all succeeded playing our various high-level sports. So I guess it can work.
But when I think about, what worked for me, and again, blessed for my opportunity and my circumstance and my privilege in that way, now that I'm thinking back, like, I had a lot of folks that I played basketball with in high school and college that, they burned out. It didn't work out for them, right? So for me to kind of, and I think a lot of people fall into that, kind of like, hey, it worked for me, it'll work for the young people, because I know what I needed to get through it. And I'm like, that's all good, right? And if you find a young person that identifies with you in that way, and you can push them through that system and guide them through that system, that's great. But a lot of young people aren't you. What works for them doesn't work. It's not what works for you, right? And we have to be cognizant of that. And when we give them this advice, make sure we're speaking from our experience, but it's not directly and only informing what their next moves are. Allow them to make those choices. We can give them our lived experience, but we can't try to force them to make the choices that we would have made.
I want to come back to you. So let's say your oldest is 6. Let's say 3 years from now, like, as a coach, as a soccer coach and soccer player, you see some real potential in her game. But then she's like, well, I want to do gymnastics now. How do you handle that? Like, how do you push? Do you let her do? Because you're seeing something that she can't see, and we talk about being the frontal lobe.
Yeah. That's a great question, man.
What would you do?
I mean, I don't know. That's a really interesting question. It's something that I definitely butted up against my own parents with.
I'm happy that's a question for you now.
Right. Because, I mean, I have my potential in sports, and if I had buckled down in the way that a lot of people advise those who want to be successful in sports to buckle down, I probably could have been better. I didn't want that. And my parents, my dad specifically, saw something that was like, you're letting something go. You are wasting some potential that I see in you that you may not see yourself. So, yeah, that can very well happen. How did I respond to that as a kid? Not well. I don't know what about it per se, but like I do distinctly remember not responding well to my dad's vision of myself. Yeah. So like maybe I'll start from there and just hope that at the time I'll remember this conversation.
Well, we got your back.
Right, but
I mean,
you're right, man. Like
recorded,
at the same
right?
time,
So
at the same time, there were some times my parents did strongly encourage to forcing me to continue on into something that did ended up being better for me.
I think it poses the question of like, what's the goal? Right? Like, are we setting goals for our young people to play sport? Are we just exploratory?
Yeah.
Because I think what happens is you sign your kid up for sport because you want them to get outside and play. You want them to make friends. You want them to have the opportunity to learn something new. And then you blink and 4 or 5 years have gone past and it's like, well, now they're either going to play AAU ball or they're going to play school ball or they're just going to keep doing rec. And so I think what does not happen is that as a family, we sit down and say, hey, what are our goals for this year when it comes to basketball? What are our goals this year when it comes to soccer? Because if you're very clear about those goals and you allow a kid to actually understand what a goal is and actually make one for themselves, you'll know if this is something they want to do or not.
Right.
Because they can actually say, I just want to show up, or I want to try to hang out with my friends. We don't check back in. We start a kid on a path, we don't check back in, and then we expect them to keep going. And then we see dollar signs or we see scholarship or we see growth and potential,
and we reward this effort that they're putting in specifically.
But honestly, what it is they're doing it for you, right? I just had a conversation with a friend of mine about Snoop and Son. It's a great show on ESPN. I don't know if you've ever seen it. But Snoop's youngest son was a 4-star football player. And they moved to Vegas to go to Bishop Gorman. He was on the #1 high school team in the country. What I took away from that show was that Snoop loved football. Snoop has a league in Los Angeles. His son did not. His son loved him. He loved Snoop, and so he would do anything in the sport so that his father would be proud of him. Does really well at Bishop Gorman, gets a full football scholarship to go to UCLA. He only played a season. Because once he had an opportunity to make his own choice and decision, I don't want to do this.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not passionate about this. My dad was passionate about this. He was actually a film major, right? Complete different from what he was doing for a very long time. So I think having check-ins, setting goals with your young people per season or per year, there's no harm in that. Because also what it does is it creates a sense of responsibility for young people too, of like, hey, we said we were gonna do this, we set out to do this, so on those tough days when we don't wanna go to practice or we're forgetting our cleats or we don't have our equipment, this is a goal that we set at the beginning of the year. If we need to revisit and maybe next year we don't play, that's fine, but give them some choice in it. Because when you don't, that's when burnout occurs. Because the moment they have an opportunity to make a decision.
And it develops so many, you have a chance to develop so many good and long-lasting habits through that model that will go into adulthood.
And burnout is like the least of the reactions you get from that.
100%. And like, you know, with the team, we love to talk about the brain. We love concepts. Like when we talk about templates all the time, like this is a chance to start to really build some good templates in regards to your work ethic and what you want things to be and how you want your young people to navigate through certain spaces. Because a lot of us, for lack of better words, we didn't have, you know, the best situations in that.
Right.
And there's been times I know that I've spoken to you about like, hey, work is nuts. Like I'm tired. Like I don't know if I want to do that no more. I think I'm done, right? But that's because I didn't have the right goal setting and for lack of better words, boundary setting templates too. Like I was like, hey, I'm supposed to be this, right? I'm supposed to be burned out like this because that means I care. That's what me showing up looks like. I'm supposed to be tired after. So we can kind of break that cycle again if we kind of set them up in a way to be successful and think about these things now.
Man, boundaries though. Like
Boundaries
that's
are tough.
the one. That's the one right there.
It took a while.
It takes a while for everybody.
It takes a while for everybody.
I mean, and that's kind of to Chris's question, like that's what I'm trying to build now with my girls. And sometimes I worry that it seems like almost like an emotional closing off. But really, I'm setting boundaries. I need you to know that you have space to feel your feelings, and I have space to feel mine. And they don't need to be opposed to one another. So I think that's
those things aren't like either or.
Right.
Like you can feel this way and I can feel this way and we can still coexist in our space. 100%.
Sports specialization should definitely be a fluent conversation in your household if athletics and sports is something that you want to instill in your youth, if it's something that you are looking for a scholarship or other opportunities in life. So thank you, gentlemen, for sharing your time.
Always.
Thank you for joining us on Coaching While Black, a CHJS podcast. Please like, listen, share, and subscribe. Follow us on social. We are CHJS.org everywhere, and find us on YouTube. Peace.
Peace.